Spider-Man is perhaps the most iconic superhero of them all. When it comes to his popularity, there is no doubt that all generations adore this character. Since 1962, Spider-Man has gleamed as an icon, especially to the younger generations, in no small part to the character usually being depicted as a high schooler and college student. And he is that prevalent that he is considered among the big three superheroes of all time. In my life, I have seen various iterations of the character, and these have had an enormous impact on my life. And with No Way Home around the corner, I wanted to talk about my own experience growing up with Spider-Man and how it led me to falling in love with the superhero genre. My first introduction of Spider-Man was in the animated series of the 1990s, and seeing this person swing from building to building fighting crime was the coolest thing to my toddler self. As a toddler and later a small child, I would watch reruns of the show on Fox Kids extensively, and I would pretend to swing around the house, pretend to stick on walls, pretend that I was Spider-Man. I had no idea what was going on. I still don't. It's been so long since I watched the series that I still have no idea what the plot was about. But as a small child, that didn't matter. There are many shows that I have seen that I can't remember what was going on in them. A prime example being Power Rangers. But that didn't matter. I just wanted to watch Spider-Man be his badass self, while his enemies tried to destroy him. Okay, so on a side note, in kids shows like this, to keep the age rating for that of all ages, kids shows couldn't use the words kill or die, or something along those lines. So destroy equals kill, which is fucking weird. While watching this series, I had always wondered what Spider-Man might look like as a real person. How would he swing in the streets of New York? How would he look saving people? And then in 2002, I got my wish. Spider-Man, directed by Sam Raimi, starring Tobey Maguire, Willem Dafoe, and is the first superhero film I could follow and understand. I'd seen other superhero films, notably Superman, but I was far too young to understand what was happening in that film. But as a 6-year-old, I could remember watching this Spider-Man for the first time, and it was like nothing I had ever seen before. An actual Peter Parker at the beginning of his journey, learning how to become Spider-Man was something new. The animated series, from what I remember from my tiny 4-year-old self, never actually explored the beginning of Peter Parker's journey, but the film did. This, along with being able to understand what the fuck was going on, enabled me to connect with this Spider-Man as I saw his powers develop, the death of Uncle Ben, and the most frightening, intimidating Green Goblin I had ever seen. This was the stuff of nightmares. Despite this, I absolutely loved this film, and I still have a fond affection for it. Yes, some of it is dated, but a lot of it still holds up, including the best suit of all the live action films. This wasn't just Spider-Man, this was the Spider-Man. This was the icon. And later on, Spider-Man 2 and 3 followed suit. Both, I think, are good films in their own right, even if 3 doesn't quite live up to the standard set. But seeing Tobey Maguire as Peter Parker, I couldn't imagine anything different. 2012 was a good year. The Avengers had just shown that team-up films can be successful, and we got the conclusion of the Dark Knight trilogy. So it was to my surprise that another Spider-Man film came out, but something about this film felt wrong. It wasn't a continuation of the series I had grown up with, but it was a reboot with a completely new Spider-Man in Andrew Garfield and a completely new cast to replace the old cast, rehashing the origin of this character, watching Peter Parker become Spider-Man again. In my opinion, The Amazing Spider-Man should never have been made, but this is a topic for another day. While Andrew Garfield was amazing as Spider-Man, and the rest of the cast gave solid performances, the only reason why The Amazing Spider-Man was made is because it had to be made. When Sony bought the film rights to Spider-Man in 1999, they bought them under a permanent contract, given one stipulation. That stipulation is that Sony have to make a Spider-Man almost every 6 years. Otherwise, the film rights go back to Marvel. And when the production of Spider-Man 4 fell through, they had to reboot the series, or they would have lost the film rights. To be fair, the first film of this series, directed by Mark Webb, was actually a decent film, but I could never bring myself to watch the second film. I still haven't watched it. One of the reasons is that it's generally considered to be a bad film, partly because Sony tried to build a cinematic universe with only one character. The Marvel Cinematic Universe was in full force by the time The Amazing Spider-Man 2 came out, forcing a lot of studios to try and play catch up. And because of this, part of me wanted The Amazing Spider-Man 2 to fail, as I believed it would help to put Spider-Man into the MCU where I felt he belonged. For me, there's not much for me to say on Tom Holland's Spider-Man. The films are great, but when the deal between Marvel and Sony was announced, that was mind-blowing. There's never been a movie deal before or since where two major studios come together to share a character. It's actually mental to think about. This means that the new live-action Spider-Man, the new Peter Parker, is in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, something I'm happy about, and it leaves Sony in a position to explore other characters in the Spider-Man lore. Miles Morales is the second character to be the main Spider-Man, making his film debut in Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Miles Morales is his own person, not a Peter Parker 2.0. While he has all the powers of Spider-Man, it's a fresh take on the mythos. But it's not my Spider-Man. This is not the Spider-Man that I grew up with. It's a Spider-Man for the next generation, which is one of the major themes of this movie. Teaching things to the next generation and passing things on. And because of this, we have an older Peter Parker, one who has been Spider-Man for over 2 decades, and it shows. He's tired, out of shape, and generally depressed. He's in the middle of his midlife crisis. I'm not quite that old, but there are times where I realise I'm getting older and think to myself, I should be doing more with my life, helping to pass things on. So it was entertaining to see that the Spider-Man that I have grown up with, teaching this new Spider-Man how to become a Spider-Man, helping him take the leap of faith. Okay, so I'm not going to spoil the film, but this scene is one of the most perfect scenes I've ever seen in cinema history. Go watch the film. This Spider-Man film understands that different generations of people, including myself, have grown up with this character, and it understands why we connect with Spider-Man. Spider-Man is a franchise that means a lot to many different people, and with the rumours circulating that all the previous live-action Spider-Man are going to be in No Way Home, I've boarded the hype train. It's got all these people excited, from the fans who grew up with the Raimi trilogy to the fans of the modern-day films. It's a film that, if successful, will be one of the biggest movie events that only happen a few times a generation. Whether you're a Tobey Maguire fan, an Andrew Garfield fan, or fan of Tom Holland's version of the character, there's definitely something to look forward to in this film, and I'll be enthusiastic to see if Spider-Man can make his way home. Hey guys, thank you for watching the video. If you'd like to see more of these weird little video essays, I'd recommend subscribing to the channel and turning on the notification bell. I also have videos like this on my channel, such as my video on a weird advert. You can also keep up to date with me on Twitter at OhNoIt'sJustin2. I'll see you in the next video. Peace.